Okay, great. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Let me know if there's other people you want me to promote, but let's just get started.
Sure.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to the April 5th, 2022 Design Review Committee meeting. I'm Kathy Williams, Town Planner. As allowed by Mass General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18 through 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, signed into law on June 16th, the Design Review Committee will hold a public meeting on April 5th, 2022 at 4 p.m. via in-person and remote access, with the information provided on the meeting agenda. I'm just going to take roll call for quorum. I know that Dick's not here. He's our normal chair. Charlie Adams.
Here.
Chris Vincent.
Here.
Steve O'Neill.
Here.
All right, we have quorum, so we can begin the meeting. The first and only agenda item is for Blue Sky Towers, LLC, who's looking to construct a 110 tall monopole communication tower with accessory ground equipment at 1044 Route 28 in South Yarmouth. And we have the applicant here to give their presentation. Is there anybody else you wanted me to promote to panelists?
Yes, if you could, Kathy, perhaps Ben Messersmith.
Okay.
He's probably, in addition to that, Sean Gormley, who's a project manager. And then we have a couple of RF engineers who are also joining, but probably not necessary. Yeah.
Well, we can certainly pull them in. So you said Ben and who else?
Sean.
Sean Gormley. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Wait 1 second. That or anybody else or?
I think that's it for now. That'd be great, Kathy. And
Oh.
And I just had a quick procedural question.
Okay.
Would you be sharing screens, or is that something that you prefer that I do?
I prefer that you do it. I'm
Okay.
trying to take the minutes to the meeting, so to speak, as well as run.
Of course.
So,
Yeah,
that
I
would
should be
great.
able to do that. Okay. So do you want me to start, Kathy?
Yes, please.
Okay. Great. So good evening, members of the Design Review Committee. For the record, Ricardo Souza here on behalf of from Prince Lobel in Boston, and we're here on behalf of the applicant, Blue Sky Towers 3. Also with me tonight is Ben Messersmith from Proterra, who's the engineer for the proposed tower. His team was responsible for developing the plans that were submitted as part of this application and that were reviewed by the Cape Cod Commission as well. And then I also have Sean Gormley, who's the program manager for Blue Sky Towers. He's responsible for essentially managing the development of this tower for the applicant. And just by way of background, Blue Sky Towers is in the business of, it's an telecommunications infrastructure company that's in the business of developing telecommunications towers, has great relationships with the various wireless carriers in the marketplace, and works closely with those carriers in order to help fill significant gaps in coverage that those wireless carriers, which are licensed by the FCC, need to fill. And in this case, Sean and his team and Blue Sky Towers is proposing this tower more specifically to help fill the gap in coverage that is experienced by, at a minimum, AT&T and T-Mobile. And you will see that as part of the testimony that we've submitted to the Cape Cod Commission and that we will submit to the town of Yarmouth, the real purpose of this telecommunications tower is really to provide reliable wireless coverage for those who are customers of AT&T and T-Mobile, and for any other carriers that that decide to install their wireless antenna equipment on this particular tower. The tower itself is proposed at the subject site located at 1044 Route 28. The property itself is owned by the Roman Catholic Archdiocese, and we are proposing a tower on the wooded section of that lot. The application itself has gone through the DRI process with the Cape Cod Commission, which concluded at the end of, I believe, January, and I believe we received a decision in February. And
Question?
yes, of
I've got a
course.
question, Attorney. Was the
Yes.
town representative from Yarmouth available that night of the vote from the Cape Cod Commission?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
he
thank you.
was.
Thank you.
Yeah, I believe, yes. And Kathy also provided testimony on behalf of the town as well and the planning board, as
Okay.
did correspondence from the Board of Selectmen.
Thank
And
you.
as part of it, yeah, sure, of course. And as part of that process, the DRI process with the Cape Cod Commission, there were what we think are improvements to the development of the site and to specific facts associated with the tower itself. And those included a reduction in height from the original height of 120 feet to 110 feet. In addition to that, the antenna frames themselves were also reduced from 12 feet to 6 feet. In addition to that, we've also reduced the spacing that the carriers occupy on the tower, what we call the vertical separation between the carriers, in order to maximize this tower for being able to host 4 wireless antenna installations. So that spacing was reduced from 15 feet to 10 to 11 feet. In addition to that, the T-Mobile antennas themselves were reduced from 9 antennas to 6 antennas. The AT&T antennas stayed at 6.
Perhaps we could go over the actual application that you're submitting to the design review committee, because that's the one that they're going to be looking at, not the original one to the Cape Cod Commission.
Yeah.
Sure, I can do that. I think this summary actually does speak to the actual application. I think it's important to set the background. However, if you'd like, I can share my screen.
That would be great.
Yeah. Let me know if that works.
There you go.
Okay, great. So this is essentially the summary that I was going through. And just by way of background, you can see that I think Blue Sky Towers has made a concerted effort to work with the Cape Cod Commission and is committed to working with the town of Yarmouth to make improvements to the development of the site itself and the tower. This is sort of the before and the after. The right-hand column consists of the specific facts associated with the application that's before you today. And that will eventually be reviewed by for site plan review, and then eventually to the zoning board for a special permit and variances and or waivers. And so if you go to the plans themselves, I assume that you have a set of plans in front of you.
Mhm.
Okay. If you turn to those, I think page A-1 of the plans, we provided on the left-hand side a Google Earth image showing the actual location of the proposed tower. As you can see, the church structure is here. And I assume you're familiar with the area clearly. And what we've decided to do is propose the subject tower here in the wooded section of the lot. And entrance will be here right off of Route 28. And here on page A-4, and I'm not going to every plan, and you should feel free to stop me and ask any questions that you may have relative to the plans. However, if you turn to A-4 of the plans, I think this helps describe the actual tower compound itself. As you can see, we've made some improvements to the landscaping on the, if you look at this particular plan, on the bottom and right-hand side of the compound itself, it will be a fence compound. And the compound itself was reduced in size from the original 5,250 square feet to 3,300 square feet. And as a result, there's some reduced clearing of trees in order to accommodate that compound. The clearing reduced from 11,390 to 9,960 square feet of clearing. But as you can see, in order to minimize the visibility into the compound itself, we've proposed some significant shrubbery and trees along that bottom and right-hand side of the compound itself.
I have a question. Are there any
Of course.
structures, located inside the boundaries there? To house? the
So there are,
equipment?
yeah, so there are not. These days, the wireless carriers have really migrated to outdoor cabinets rather than shelters. And so at least these particular two carriers are utilizing outdoor cabinets. And that will minimize visibility as well, or I should say obtrusiveness. And on the right-hand side of this same page, you can see the profile of the tower. I think what's most notable is the profiles themselves of the antennas. What we've tried to do is utilize those smaller mounting brackets and mounting platforms so that the antennas themselves are as flush as they possibly can be to the tower, rather than the larger external mounts. And I think you can see that fairly well on the tower. This is another page, CA1 is another explanation, shows those mounts a little bit in more detail at the bottom left-hand side. You can see it on my screen, but page CA1 of the plans. And so those are sort of the basic aspects of the proposed development. However, I would like to make Ben Messersmith available in the event that you have questions regarding the plans themselves, the placing of the tower within the lot, the driveway access road, the fencing, the shrubbery, or any questions more specifically towards the compound.
Are you done with the presentation for now? Maybe we can go around and see if the
Yeah,
committee members have
yes.
questions?
Absolutely.
So, I don't know, Steve, if you wanted to go first, you look like yes.
Yeah, so I have a ton of questions here, but I don't want to take up everyone's time, but I do think this committee should indicate, at least from my perspective, I'm kind of the new guy here, but I don't think this proposal at all deals with any of the items that are called out for as far as design review committee is asking. I just think this is a proposal that's was done quickly, done to accommodate the needs of the carriers and Blue Sky, and not necessarily with the consideration of the town at hand. And I say that because a couple of things. One is the town has gone through a pretty significant visioning process. And out of that visioning process came a lot of good, solid input from the community regarding where this town is headed right now and into the future. And aesthetics is a big, big feature of Route 28. And this
Right.
by far does not do anything aesthetically at all to anything along 28. So right off the bat, we have a new working toward an updated master plan. And here we go with one of the biggest amazing thing that's going to be coming out of the ground next to a church in the middle of a visually and aesthetically pleasing area. That said, there are a bunch of things that, I think 8 or 9 different things that we had gone through, or you had gone through relative to the requirements of this board, looking at the bylaws, et cetera. And I don't think you dealt with any one of those. This project as proposed doesn't deal with any of those, in my opinion. And I specifically point to the height of this. You admitted, attorney, that the height has been reduced from 120 down to 110, but 110 is still very, very high. The antennas are attached at the top very unslightly. The way these are proposed, I acknowledge the fact that you went from initially 12 foot down to 6 foot. The spacing of them has been decreased, but again, those are very unsightly. And I only point to looking across the street behind the post office building, you have a viable antenna there that's working very, very well, but it's concealed. It does its best to blend into the environment around it and doesn't offend the environment around it. This, I think, does. Furthermore, as far as the supplemental alternative site analysis, in my opinion, this was done hastily. It was done with little regard for any of the town-owned property that comes under the jurisdiction of the town. I don't think any of that was looked at. Of the eight rejected sites, 6 of those sent out letters and there was no response to the certified mailing. There was no follow-up done. So in your opinion, because no one responded back to you all, that was gone. We're not going to pursue any more analysis of that site, despite the fact there are public documents available that you could look at without going onto the site, even if the owner didn't want you on that site. So I think there was little regard done for looking at other locations of town-owned property and these other locations that are in the town. Furthermore, there's a lot of public-owned property, town-owned property on Buck Island. It has a fire station there. It has a DPW yard there. I don't know if any analysis or any questions were ever done to the DPW director or to the fire department chief. And if there is wastewater being proposed for that area, then has anyone from your group contacted the engineering firm that's charged with doing some of the wastewater analysis that is going to be in that area? So I don't think you have. So it says to me that the review of and analysis of these alternative sites was done in haste, that a site was already picked out. You guys had your mind set on where you wanted to go because of the height, because of the sight lines, because of other things. So no other efforts were spent on these other locations. So in my opinion, I'm going to vote, I guess, to at least have some information on the record that goes forward to the Zoning Board of Appeals that encourages the Zoning Board of Appeals to ask you to pursue the review of additional sites before we give a blessing off on this particular site. That's all for now. Yeah.
Yeah, understood. I appreciate the comments. So there's a lot there. And I guess the first question I have is from a jurisdictional standpoint, there are essentially 3 steps relative to this application. There will be a more thorough analysis of the alternative site design, alternative site analysis together with the radio frequency plots, the propagation, and why this site was selected. And there's a question as to whether or not those items should be reviewed by this committee or by the Zoning Board of Appeals, excuse me. And with respect to the CAM site across the street, that is something that we did look at, or that AT&T and T-Mobile did look at. The nature of CAMs is that they simply cannot accommodate the latest 5G equipment that's necessary to operate all of the panoply of services that are authorized to be offered by the wireless carriers themselves under their FCC licenses. And so that's the limitation with respect to the CAM. If you take a step back from a common sense standpoint, clearly AT&T and T-Mobile would go on that CAM and install their antennas below Verizon if they could, but they simply can't. They can't offer the 5G level services that are necessary to be able to provide reliable coverage, both for data and voice for their customers. And so what we're trying to do here is trying to find a solution that will accommodate multiple carriers. We know that T-Mobile and AT&T have gaps in coverage. We can talk about those radio frequency plots themselves. The RF engineers can talk about that gap in coverage. And what we're trying to find is a solution that solves that gap in coverage, not just for one carrier and not just for 3G services, but for 5G services and more modern services for multiple carriers. And that's why the proposed height is necessary as well. It simply we cannot accommodate the CAM type of installation. Regarding the design, I think Blue Sky Towers is willing to enter into a conversation regarding a proposed design. A couple of alternatives that were discussed, at least at the Cape Cod Commission, were either a pylon sign, a three-legged pylon sign, or perhaps a monopine. Both of those may or may not be acceptable to this committee and or to the Site Plan Review Committee or to the Zoning Board of Appeals. But we're willing to work with the design itself, and if that's a preference of yours. With respect to the town making town-owned land available, I think it's important to note that this is not 1996, it's not 1998, it's 2022, and I'm not aware of an open RFP to wireless carriers or wireless developers for town-owned land. I think if there was some interest by the town, I think they would have made town-owned land available to carriers such as, and applicants such as Blue Sky Towers. So I think there's a lot to unpack. I understand your position, and I'd like to try to work through these open items. If you're amenable, if not, then I respect your recommendation as well to the zoning board.
Again, I'm not speaking for everyone here. I'm speaking for myself.
Right.
But certainly, I'm glad to hear that there's some willingness on your side to pursue some alternatives. I think camouflage, first of all, I think we need to be convinced that other sites, particularly those other 6 that I mentioned before, have been exhausted as far as research analysis as to why a 110-foot tower can't be located on it.
Yep.
Despite the fact, even if people didn't return a certified, or they returned a certified mail or didn't return, there's other ways of obtaining information on the sites that are available to you through public documents. So I think it behooves you, before we decide as a committee here on approving or disapproving or making recommendations, to do some more analysis on it. Because to me, it slaps me in the face that, okay, we spent the time we had to cover ourselves, a COIA, and this is the site we want to go to. So I think it behooves you guys to do some more work on that before we decide to talk as far as any other design alternatives. But having said that,
Yep.
I for one am anxious if after that analysis is done and you come back to this has to be the site, that there has to be some camouflage done to that tower. That's very unsightly at this point. The last thing we need to have is visitors coming into this community saying, oh yeah, we're going to meet you down by the tower. Oh, you can't miss it. It's right there on 28. We don't need that. All right. We don't need that. So there are examples here, and I'm sure the staff can share some of those examples. I don't know if we can
Yep.
share it right now, but there's ways of camouflaging this. Tree camouflage is one, but there's other ways of with sculpture. You know, this community is becoming real big on community art and public art as tying into something like that. But those things have to be considered as well. And then finally, as to your point on public-owned property, well, typically the public wouldn't put out an RFP for a DPW yard or a fire station lot. All I'm suggesting that this should have been, or there can be in the future and now, some dialogue with the fire chief and or the DPW director, or maybe even the town administrator as to the availability of and the potentiality of putting a tower on either the fire station property or the DPW property.
Yeah. I'm happy to track those down a little bit closer. You know, it's an important element that clearly a site has to work from a radio frequency perspective in a location that fills the gap. Secondly, it has to be constructible. For example, can't build something in a wetlands. And third, you have to have a willing landlord. You have to have a willing property owner that's that's willing to, in the case of the town, put out an RFP and make it available to wireless carriers. I think this application has been.
I understand that.
Yep.
I have some background in this. I know exactly what you're talking about. I understand all that. But notwithstanding all of that, there's still some dialogue that has to occur with some of these people, the town manager, fire chief, DPW chief. And when you're speaking with the town manager, if there's any available public property that possibly may work for this thing, understanding all the requirements that you have to have. But there should be that dialogue.
Okay, we can provide, he's not on the team today for this call, but representatives of one of the carriers has been in touch over the years, trying to encourage an RFP for town-owned land to no avail. And so, yeah, as I said, you have to have a willing landlord who's
Understood.
willing to put out an RFP pursuant to Chapter 30B,
Right. That was then. This is now. We have a proposal before us with a 110-foot tower with the antennas hanging off it on 28, which is a major traffic carrier through the town. So maybe people's eyes will be changed, their minds will be changed as to what they see before them.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just prod one thing that you said as well, which is with respect to the art design. Were you talking about a pylon sign where there's art up and down the three-legged pylon design? Just so we can understand what the preference is from a design standpoint, because
Actually, no, let me describe them to you. There's a couple of things.
sure.
Kathy,
Sure.
I'm sorry.
I can't, I had opened.
That's okay. Let me just see if I can,
Where's the,
That's right, I'm just gonna.
let me see if I can describe it while you do that too. Can you see that?
So there's
I
a bunch of
can,
different
yes.
block tower options. There's a more elaborate bell tower with a structure, and then there's that actual sculpture that was created.
Right.
And I think this is what we were trying to get at through the Cape Cod Commission is like, okay, if you have declared and based, everyone has agreed that this is the only location for it for a variety of whatever reason, now you need to start working on the aesthetics.
Okay. And unfortunately, the aesthetics is not a one-way discussion, right? It's a two-way discussion because it's a subjective thing.
Yeah.
So I think what we've done is try to communicate a spirit of openness, a spirit of trying to have a dialogue relative to preference. I think a monopine is something that you would do clearly in Vermont. It may not be the best design.
if I may.
Given the height of trees. Yeah, absolutely.
Jump in here.
Yeah.
Chris Vincent is my name. I'm a member of the planning board. I'm their representative to this committee. And I'm sure you have these letters that the planning board has written, the town staff has written. This is from back in December, letting them know our concerns about the proper design, the aesthetic concerns. Saying that, and the design that you gave us today is exactly the same as from before in December. So why was no effort made before this meeting to address those concerns? That was 4 months ago.
Yeah. Primarily because that was not the preference of the Cape Cod Commission. Cape Cod Commission did not push us towards a monopine, did not push us towards a pylon sign. There seemed to be no receptiveness. If I could finish, and this is the first step, what I would consider a dialogue. It's clearly an application, but it's a dialogue as to what the town's preference is. I don't think there was anything definitive about what the town wanted in that correspondence, because you can go in so many different directions. You can go into a monopine, you can go into a pylon sign, you can try to force a much larger structure, which I think could be very obtrusive, which is like the bell tower that you showed on that handout. And so there needs to be an understanding as to what the town's preference is. It's your jurisdiction to talk about design, and we're all ears. We'd like to hear what your thoughts are relative to design.
Well, I think what I'm saying is that we did tell you our concerns back in December, and it's been 4 months, and you came here with just the same old stuff. I think that's the concern. When we let you know, we were trying to say, hey, this, and I'm an engineer, so I understand that this is probably the best site for this, right?
Yep.
I get that. And if it is, fine. But the town voiced their concerns back in December, and you've come to us with nothing new. It's the same old thing. I think that's the concern. So if there's going to be some give and take or discussion, I would have liked to have seen you come forward with saying, hey, this is the location for the tower. We understand your concerns. Here are some options
Right.
for more aesthetic design.
Understood. Okay. Well, I think some of the dialogue in our application itself talks about the fact that we can do a monopine and we can do a pylon sign. Those are two that are available to us already. Above and beyond that, there's some limitations. You know, you have to make the material has to be RF transparent so that the antennas themselves, which are hidden, are transmitting through that material. And so there are structural aspects to building something like that. There's also cost limitations as well relative to building something like that. You know, when carriers go into church steeples all the time, but they have to replace a lot of that wooden cladding or shingles with RF transparent material. But if what you're voicing to us is that either a monopine is not acceptable or a pylon sign is not acceptable, then you either are going to give us a negative recommendation or there has to be some other alternative that would be more preferential to you or to your committee.
And we're just a board, so we're not the experts in what you just described. You guys are, which is why when we suggest aesthetic alternatives, we'd say, you as the professionals know what these aesthetic alternatives are that could work. Why don't you bring them to us and then that's the start of that discussion.
Okay. Yes.
I have a couple of questions. I think it's my feeling is the same as my fellow members here. Without repeating, one of the things that hasn't been brought up, that when the other tower was brought up roughly 4 years ago, there had been no check on what effect it has with the airport. Just a few minutes ago, me being here, I'm within this particular area. I'm no more than probably 3/4 of a mile from this particular location. And the planes come in, depending upon weather conditions, I'm sure, fairly low. And I think that needs to be checked out through the Barnstable County Airport to see what effect it might possibly have. The other thing is, what effect does it have with health purposes? And the other one, there was questions pertaining to the waves electronically or whatever have had effect on people. And has that been checked out where you're in a heavily residential neighborhood? And I number one feel that the location is there's got to be other locations, and I think preferably town-owned property that could be worked out. I think an effort should be made to work with the town on some of their other locations, and that not where you have such main visibility with traffic and people here, and especially in the summertime. This year, this time of the year isn't quite so bad, but you know, we're just going to have thousands of people that are going to be coming by here, and I don't think that we need to look at a tower. And that's one of the things that, you know, we don't know right now as to what has been selected as a tower. And I think that when you come back, assuming you're going to be coming back, that you have some, you know, very definite plans on from a cost standpoint. I realize that you've got a certain amount of money that you've got to put into this, that you'll show us what some of the alternatives are, and a selection can be made, you know, on that basis, and checking out these other things. I really feel that the location is not a very good one. It doesn't fall within the parameters of this board. It leaves out much to be desired.
If I could address all those points, I appreciate your comments, of course, and points. first of all, from a FAA standpoint, it's required by FCC and FAA regulations that all of these towers pass compliance. And so this one, we've done a tow air, which is an analysis that shows that it would not interfere with any flight paths and would be approved by the FAA. And the Mass Aeronautical Commission is the same thing. So these towers cannot get developed without those types of approvals in advance. In addition to that, with respect to electromagnetic energy and radio frequency emissions, each of these carriers, as part of our special permit application to the zoning board, and we can provide this report to you, it was provided to the Cape Cod Commission, has to show that the antennas themselves, not only AT&T and T-Mobile, but future carriers, the analysis shows the tower fully loaded is fully compliant with FCC regulations relative to electromagnetic energy. And there's case law, federal case law, that suggests that these installations, as long as they comply with FCC regulations on EME, cannot be denied based upon health effects. And that's an important distinction that, you know, I defer to your town council for you to have that discussion with them. But you will see a report in the special permit application that shows that the tower itself will be fully compliant, well below the limits set by the FCC for EME. And then with respect to siting, I think those are the similar comments to what we've talked about earlier. If I could share my screen one more time, would that be okay?
Yeah, sure.
So this was submitted as part of the Cape Cod Commission application, which shows essentially 3 different designs that were discussed with the Cape Cod Commission. On the left-hand side is your sort of traditional telecommunications tower. In the middle would be a monopine, and on the right-hand side is the pylon sign. So these are 2 proposals that were brought by the Cape Cod Commission, understanding that their jurisdiction is very different than what the town's jurisdiction is.
Right, well said.
Yeah, in the sense that they have a DRI guidelines that are different than zoning that you're reviewing. These were 2 alternative designs that we presented.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
The monopine and the tower,
The bell tower?
the pylon tower was presented to the Cape Cod Commission as part of the application prior to it being withdrawn.
Mhm.
There was 2 applications that were submitted because of timing situations, but when it was resubmitted, because to restart the clock, so to speak, none of these were included. When did that all go to the wayside, other alternatives? Was that in a private conversation with the commission, or?
No, not at all. I believe I discussed it. As you know, or you may or may not know, I took over the application midway at the Cape Cod Commission. I think my first hearing was either late December, early January. It was after the new application was submitted. And I remember having dialogue on the record regarding these alternative designs. It wasn't discussed at length. We didn't pull back these designs in any way. They are still alternatives if it's a preference of the town. There's not a significant amount of things that can be done relative to design, you know. These are 2 viable alternatives that we've seen in the past and that can be utilized here. And so we've never pulled them back. I'm not sure. I believe they were still part of the RF reports that were attached to the application.
Well, I know from speaking for myself, again, I don't want to speak for everyone here, but Attorney, I would like what we showed you a few moments ago. I would like consideration of those designs given to your engineers and have them come back with some feedback to us as to why they cannot be utilized. Again, this isn't the Cape Cod Commission area right here. This is the town of Yarmouth. And have you driven down that street in that area where this tower is going to go?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Okay, so you know exactly what we're all about here. You know how offensive this tower is going to be as it stands right now without any type of camouflage attributes that could be put on it. So you need to help us do our job in sending along a report to the next step here as to, we've done everything we can to convince the attorney and the Sky, what is it, Sky?
Blue sky.
Blue Sky Tower.
Blue Sky to take steps to camouflage this as best they can, after consideration of reviewing those other sites as well.
You have to take in consideration for the town of Yarmouth that this is basically our town center, this area. It's not a, 20 blocks out one way or the other. It's basically right in the center. And if you can picture what people are going to say and what they feel, and having this needle sticking up, no matter what the design is, wherever it is going to be important, but having this right in the middle of your metropolitan area, if you will. And so I think that's something that has been mentioned that we really have to take into consideration on this board, because it does not fall within one of the key areas that we have to be concerned about.
Yep. So what I'd like to do is maybe just have the benefit of that handout if I could, and I'll share it with
Sure.
Blue Sky Towers engineers. I will also meet with their project manager as well, and we'll discuss the viability of those. In addition to that, I'd like to, not knowing how you wanted to conduct this hearing, if you want us to get into the actual alternative site design analysis and the different locations and what our efforts were. I don't have that team on the Zoom tonight.
That's all right.
But at the next time that we meet, I can make sure that team is on, because I honestly thought we were talking more about the actual design itself, the site plan, rather than the alternative site design and the RF engineering. But I'm happy to, if amenable to this committee, reschedule and make sure that the next time we meet that those individuals are present, and then we can also talk about the viability of different designs as well.
I think just to be clear, what the design review committee does is, you guys want to get into the technical aspect. I've seen all of that through the Cape Cod Commission, and we really needed the peer review by Isotope Wireless in order to even remotely understand it. And I'm sure that when we go to the Zoning Board of Appeals, they're going to hire their own expert.
Similar, right.
Similarly, in order to make them feel comfortable with regard to the siting. I think what you guys can do is saying, we want the siting confirmed through the process that happens through the Zoning Board of Appeals. But with regard to the aesthetics, you want to have this additional dialogue with regard to alternative designs that can be done.
I would like a complete review over and above this listing of locations that you've looked at before. I think that an effort should be made to go well beyond that. We don't need to have a rehash of what has already been done. I think that with the help of other people, that you can, look at other locations that will fit within the category of your engineers and in all respects. And then we're primarily interested in obviously the location and the sort of part of it. And that's what we need to, not the technical aspect of things.
So the follow-up what you and Charlie said, Kathy, I too want some more information on aesthetics. And I too want some more information on rejected sites.
Okay. Yep.
I want to know why they're rejected. And here's an example of what kind of triggered me off on this whole thing. On site ID rejected 2. This is 72 Old Main Street, map 50, lot 121. Reasons for rejection. A, lack of space to satisfy setback standards, closer proximity to residential property, and lack of developable location for wireless facility. I don't know what that C means, but I do have a clear understanding what A and B mean. But A says to me that if that's a possibility, but for the setback requirements, and that could be an issue that could be brought before the ZBA, saying, hey, but this is a good this is another location for us. could you consider, now, as far as B, closer proximity to residences, heck, look at a residential property around where you're proposing. Charlie just told you, he's living across the street. So
Yeah, we
you
can
gave
provide
good
more
some
color
examples.
into
You gave some
that.
examples there and rejected, that site rejected two, but the other ones, again, no response to certified mailing was, okay, sayonara, see you later. We're not going to deal with this anymore. So need some more information.
Yeah, we can provide more color on those. And I think having a representative talk about each of these sites and why more specifically they were rejected, I think is important. You know,
Right.
we also have to remember too, though, there are surrounding sites. For example, on my screen now are the T-Mobile surrounding sites. And so it's not as if the entire town of Yarmouth is open for the development of this tower for purposes of filling this gap in coverage. So I think that's important to know as well. And we can talk a little bit about that and why you can't get too close to these other sites. As you can see, our proposed site here is in the middle of those other surrounding sites. And that's one of the ways that you fill the gap in coverage.
Right, but there's got to be some compromise there too, right? You're asking
there
for
is.
us for certain things, and we're willing to work with you to compromise. We're asking.
Absolutely. No site is perfect. No
Right,
site is going to
exactly.
fill.
Yeah.
Yeah, no site is going to fill every single gap in coverage that our customer carriers have in the town of Yarmouth. Even this site doesn't fill every single gap in coverage. But it fills a substantial portion of the gap in coverage. And as you know, there's also some limitations. There's a very large residential neighborhood to the north. Many of those are small residential lots. We clearly can't use those and put them on a residential lot that has a home if it's a small lot. And so that'll be part of our testimony and our explanation of the alternative sites that we looked at and why they do or do not work. And I'm happy to put together that team for the next meeting so that we can walk through those more specifically.
But while you're doing that, the water department is close to that area up there,
Good point, Chris.
which could be a great spot. I happen to live in that area. I'd love to see coverage because I can tell you myself what coverage
Yeah.
is not.
Right.
But consider the water district.
Good point.
Property.
On Forest
Yeah.
Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
That might solve one of the problems.
There's a
Yeah,
lot of-
If I know what you're talking about, I think it's much further to the north, right? Where I'm pointing the cursor
No.
more or less. No?
Direct-
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's directly north of Long Pond,
Okay.
kind of off of Mulford Street, I think is the one I was thinking of, south of Mulford, kind of between your house and my house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Might be an option, but this is something that I think it's the dialogue with the town administration as to whether they're interested.
Right.
I don't know
Right.
who's talked to years and years and years ago. I can guarantee you that probably the majority of them no longer work for the town of Yarmouth. It was the town administrator or an older DPW director. I don't know. I know this has been going on for quite some time,
Yep.
so.
Right. Okay.
So I think it sounds as though you guys would like them to come back with some additional information.
Yes.
Yes, different aesthetic option, and I will send you that. I'm sorry, I
That
meant
would
to
be great.
pull it up, I couldn't pull it up.
It's okay.
And then you're gonna do some more detailed information on the different alternatives
Alternatives.
analysis, and then come back to us.
With those 2 points you guys just made too, with that water department property too. You're talking
I'll
about
look at those.
Forest Street, right? Forest Road?
Yeah, there's also the too far north, the senior center
Yeah, that might be.
too.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I think that you should go to the board that would make the person in charge in the town on town-owned property, whoever that might be, and get a feeling from them whether it's feasible or not from their standpoint, so that you'll have a yes or no, that it would be possible to put it on the water department property, or put it at the DPW location. And if it's on the DPW, it would seem to me, in most towns that I'm familiar with, I've come from other towns, towers, part of the DPW, and that you expect to see a tower there. And, but you don't see it in the middle of a parking lot or a church. And in the main center of town.
So we'll look at those properties, and the first analysis is, will they work from an RF standpoint to fill the gap in coverage? And then we'll take it from there. But that's the first.
Hopefully you got a
level
clear
of
understanding.
analysis.
Hopefully you got a clear understanding where we're coming from, and
I believe I do. Yes, I believe.
What we're
I
gonna
do.
do is, we're gonna review the minutes to the meeting and just vote on them, and then I will send them to you. So you will have
Great.
the minutes for the meeting with the need to come back to design review. Okay?
That'll be helpful, Kathy. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Appreciate that.
So typically I just kind of verbally go through my comments and get concurrence, and then they vote on it. So the summary of the presentation, Attorney Sousa represented the applicant, introduced his team members, and gave an overview of the proposed project. Sky Towers works with carriers to identify and fill gaps in coverage, noting AT&T and T-Mobile. The purpose of the tower is to provide reliable wireless coverage for the carriers. The tower is proposed on the wooded section of 1044 Route 28. The project has gone through the development of regional impact process with the commission. As part of that process, Attorney Sousa noted the improvements which were made and included in the design review committee application. Attorney Sousa reviewed the site plans, identifying the site location, entrance, tower compound within fencing and landscaping, profile of the tower mounting brackets for the antennas, and details of the equipment. Then just talking about design review questions and discussions. Steve O'Neill inquired as to whether there were any structures to house the equipment. Attorney Sousa said they are using outside cabinets. Mr. O'Neill noted that the application does not seem to take the town into consideration. The town has undergone a visioning process regarding the direction of the town, and aesthetics is an important feature of Route 28. This proposal does not improve Route 28. There are a few objectives gone through in the application, but the project did not deal with any of those, emphasizing the height of 110 feet. Antennas are unsightly and changes are minor. Verizon has a viable antenna across the street that is concealed and blends in with the environment. The supplemental site analysis was done hastily and does not include looking at town property. Of the 8 rejected sites, 6 got no responses with no follow-up. Furthermore, a lot of town-owned property on Buck Island, and wondered if any inquiries were made. The site was already picked out and no effort on other sites. Mr. O'Neill would like information on the record to encourage the ZBA to include the review of additional sites. Attorney Sousa noted that there will be more thorough analysis with why the site was chosen provided to the ZBA. With regard to the campsite across the street, they did look at it, but cannot accommodate latest 5G equipment to operate all the services on that camp. Trying to find a solution that will accommodate multiple carriers and solve the gap in coverage for 5G, which is why the proposed height is necessary. Regarding the design, Blue Skies Towers is willing to discuss proposed designs, a 3-legged pile sign or a monopine, which may not be acceptable, but will work on the design itself. With respect to the town-owned land, there is no open RFP to use town-owned land. Mr. O'Neill was glad to hear Blue Sky is willing to look at alternatives, but should fully vet the other sites and have dialogue with the town. If this is the only site, there needs to be some camouflage to the town. Attorney Sousa noted that you need to have a willing property owner, which I do agree as well. Chris Vincent noted the previous planning board and planning staff comments from the December DRI, noting the aesthetic concerns, but the design is exactly the same. Attorney Sousa indicated that the Cape Cod Commission did not push for them to look at alternatives. There needs to be an understanding of the town's preferences. Mr. Vincent noticed that we are looking for more options. Attorney Sousa noted that there are structural aspects and cost consideration for other designs. Chris Vincent said the applicant, as a professional, should bring forth these different options. Charlie Adams indicated his feeling is similar as the others, but inquired about impacts to the airport. As the planes come in fairly low and need to check with Barnstable Airport to see if there'll be any effects. He also asked about health impacts and questions regarding wave frequency impacts to people in residential neighborhoods. He felt there has to be better locations, preferably town-owned property and not in such a highly visible location in our tourist area. Mr. Adams noted that there are cost consideration and show us some of the alternatives, and a selection can be made on that basis. Attorney Sousa noted the FAA requirements are all towers to pass compliance and would not interfere with flight paths. In addition, with regard to electromagnetic energy, the antennas analysis, I'm sorry, I can't even speak anymore. The antenna analysis is fully compliant with that and will be submitted to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Attorney Sousa showed the simulation of the monopine and the pylon sign, as these are 2 viable alternatives. Mr. O'Neill noted that he would like consideration of the designs presented by the Design Review Committee today and why they can't be used. or if they can be used. Mr. Adams noted that this area is essentially our town center, and picture what people say about this needle sticking out in our tourist area. Kathy Williams will forward the tower options discussed at the Design Review Committee to Attorney Sousa for the applicant's engineers to evaluate the viability of those. And the Design Review Committee members want more information and comprehensive evaluation of other locations, including town waterland, as well as options for aesthetics. And then have the applicant come back to us. It's a little more verbatim than most minutes, but that's the only way I can get it out. So I'm looking for, sorry. So I'm looking for a motion to approve these design review comments as meeting minutes for the April 5th, 2020 meeting for the proposed communication tower and ground equipment at 1044 Route 28.
So moved.
Second.
And can we have a vote? And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And one more thing, and then we're done. Okay. And then we just need to have a vote to adjourn the design review committee meeting at 5 o'clock.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. So I will send you that stuff and we'll go from there.
Very good. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, members of the committee.
Yeah.
Look forward
Thank
to
you.
our next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
We go on.